your hair is always on fire for your audit every year, right? Let's smooth that out and not grind your business to a halt for 2 months when your audit comes around next year. And by the way, you'll be more.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Cyber Confidential. On this show, we got our guest, Jesse Miller from Power PSA Consulting. Jesse, welcome to the Cyber Confidential podcast.
Hey, glad to be here, man. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, so excited to dive into some of the topics we had today, and thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. All right, we just went through 40 minutes of tech issues getting the show going, so buckle up, everyone. We're just going live with this. All right, Jesse, give the audience a brief intro. Who are you? What's Power PSA?
Yeah, no problem. So Jesse Miller, founder of Power PSA Consulting, as I mentioned, have created what we call the Power Grid vCISO system. And that's really a system that's designed to help MSPs crack the code for building, scaling, and profiting from vCISO services in their MSPs.
Okay, sweet. So this episode is going to be all about vCISO. It's a hot topic that people love talking about. There's definitely a hype train. We can't deny that. There's a hype train on it. Last couple of years, everyone's been hyping up how you got to do cybersecurity. You got to start selling cybersecurity. You got to start selling cybersecurity. Yes. Yeah. And I'm preaching to the choir here because it says that on my shirt. But the vCISO thing is like the next level of that hype train where people are being spoken at. And MSPs are being told, like, if you're not doing vCISO, you're leaving money on the table, which is, like that's an important thing to think about for running a business, but it's not always like the reason your clients need you to provide a service is not because you want to make money. Yeah. So give us the basics here. Tell us what the 5 letters mean, why one of them is tinier than the others, and what it means to a small business owner, what it means to an MSP.
That could be a whole show right there, because there's so much argument that goes on in the space about what do we actually call this service. But it's funny that you say it's the hype train now, and I'm over here just super duper excited because for 10 years, I feel like I've been yelling into the void about this stuff, and it was not talked about. So I think we're reaching this tipping point, which we can get into some of that. But yeah, so vCISO, what does that stand for? Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. So Chief Information Security Officer, for those that don't know, is an executive in an organization who helps align the organization's cybersecurity program with the goals for the business. So it's a strategic executive resource that manages cybersecurity, right? So what is a virtual Chief Information Security Officer? Well, it's just a fractional, and this is where some of the arguments come in. People say, don't call it virtual, it's fractional. We're all calling it virtual Chief Information Security Officer at this point. So that's what I'm going to stick with, because most people, I think, understand that term to be what it is the best, right? So there you go. There's my two-bit definition.
I even find when I explain it to someone, I'll say vCISO is like fractional access to a CISO in your company. Mm-hmm. So we throw the fractional in, but I guess lowercase f doesn't look as cool as a lowercase v at the beginning.
There's something to be said about the sibilance of the word as we say it, and I think that's partially due to why we call it vCISO.
Okay, so this is in line with the general philosophy of what a managed service provider does for a small business, because in many ways they are also a fractional IT department for the small business client, right? And that is one of the core benefits of having an outsourced MSP is you get fractional access to this great diverse skill set instead of having 8 employees or one person with a solo skill set. So how's that grafting over to the vCISO world with the value prop to the small business client?
Yeah, I think, and it's a shame because I think the vCIO that's traditionally understood as part of something MSPs deliver, I think a lot of MSPs deliver as part of their IT services, has been kind of relegated into an account manager role, right? They're really just order takers. They're talking to the clients being like, hey, what are you going to buy this month? And so that clients don't see it as valuable if it's built that way. Now, there are some vCIO programs and vCIOs out there who are actually doing the strategic consulting portion of it. But I think for MSPs, that are thinking about vCISO, it's good to draw parallels there, right? A vCIO is kind of helping the organization, or a true vCIO is helping the organization make technology decisions to enable their business, right? Like, what CRM could we implement to give us a competitive advantage? Is there digital transformation initiatives we could undertake to help us create efficiencies in our business, save money, get to market quicker, all of those things, like technology enablement for business. That's a vCIO, right? Now, a vCISO on the other side is taking the risk lens approach and enabling the business through resilience, right? So they're looking at, okay, we're going to implement this digital transformation. What are the risks to the business, right? And how can we help the business go fast while staying safe? So people they always used to like to use the term brakes on a race car, right? So brakes on a race car actually don't slow the race car down. They help it hit the turns at the most optimal speed to get through the turns faster. And that's the way you want to think about a vCISO program.
Okay, that's scratching my race car itch because, Jess, you may not know this, but in college, I built race cars for 5 years. But we
Okay, all
won't go
right.
into that story.
That's awesome. We
Okay,
should.
that is a good comparison to provide, at least for the audience, to have an understanding of both of these roles. Many cases, they may just merge into one person's role. The difference between vCIO, vCISO, and what the S really means. The S in your example stands for risk, for the risk coach. So we're mixing in letters and words continuously, but we're in IT, so that's a constant paradigm that we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Is, I mean, but it's really about aligning the cybersecurity program or security, right, with the business goals. So again, where we can go wrong here is we go in and say, okay, a vCISO is just going to recommend all of our tools to the client. Well, that's really not the point.
Right.
The point is to look at the client's business and say, where do we have gaps that could hamstring us, or where could we get snake bit along the way if we don't plan for and prepare for these things? And to say, again, people get a little upset with me when I say this, but to have good enough security for the business, right? And what is good enough security? It's a synthesis of the risk appetite, and the gaps that you have to say, okay, what's our budget? How much can we spend? How much do we have to spend? And where can we get the most mileage for that spend to make us secure enough to move forward based on our risk tolerance, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a hard shift, I think, sometimes for MSPs to make, because we're perfectionists in a lot of ways. And I think I've coined the term professor perfection for this, right? Is we get in our own way a lot of the time because we let good be the enemy of done, or perfect be the enemy of done, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's an easy way to hurt the trust that you have with the client if you try and sell them everything. And I chose my words specifically. If you try and sell them everything instead of telling them what they need or helping them choose what they need, then they're going to just think of you as the salesperson saying, yes, you need this, because you want to sell it to them, instead of being their advisor saying, you don't need this, you do need this for this reason, you don't need this for this reason. That, like, you have to be able to show that you do say no sometimes. Otherwise, they just know, this person's always going to say, yes, I need it. Here's the invoice.
Yeah. Well, we've just fallen into that account management trap with the vCIO program. It's the same problem, right?
Yeah. And I think that's when I hear the hype train, it's my ears are interpreting it as a salesperson's telling another salesperson, you should start doing this because it'll increase your sales. Okay, let's pump the brakes here, because that's not the reason to do it. Because if the client thinks that you're doing it just to sell them, they won't listen to you. And that's when the quarterly business reviews go south, because they think you're there to sell at them. And you are, because that's like the first line in your bullet point was, sell them all the packages that we have now.
Yeah. It's an approach that I like to call the virtuous sales funnel. That's how we should look at it. Equal value exchange. We should provide the client value and get paid fairly for it. So that's why the whole idea of having incentives for vCIOs or vCISOs, even for products that they're selling, I think is a terrible idea. I'm okay with bonuses as a department, depending on, hey, if we're profitable, everyone should get a bonus. I think that's fair, right? That actually makes you want to bring more value because more clients are going to want the service, of course. But when we take that approach, and I call it our account management or our customer success. I like to call it stewardship. We've been given this client to steward and to try and help them become successful. And by being good stewards, we don't line our pockets, right? We provide good value for the customer, but then yes, we should expect to be paid fairly, and I think paid handsomely for doing that, because it's all about value exchange. If I can help their business make $1 million more by getting to market faster and using security as a customer trust perspective, then yeah, I should get paid 6 figures on that contract that year, and I plan to get paid that. Right? So,
and this is in my lexicon, this is the difference between like selling them the individual steps versus helping them achieve the outcome and taking your commission off of that. Because if the salesperson is approaching it just like, I got to sell them all of my individual packages because that's how I get my margin, then you're a commodity making 15% margin on everything that you sell. Or in your example, if your objective is to help the client make another $1 million and be the digital transformation and risk methods to get there, your value is $1 million, not the 15% extra margin on the commodity that you just sold them. And you can make it making a 10x return on investment for the client on $1 million is way more money than selling 3 more licenses with a 15% markup.
Amen. That's perfect. Yeah.
So this
exactly.
okay. So now we're diving this and we're going to the rabbit hole. So it's easy for a sales team to be incentivized to sell packages because they get a commission off the packages. If that's the incentive structure, let's say it's an MSP and they got 1 or 2 salespeople. So we're talking about a little bit more mature MSP at this point. But if the incentive structure is the more packages you sell, the more sales commission that you earn, the salespeople will do that because they'll follow the incentives.
Water rolls downhill.
Everyone works through the incentives as they should. The problem is not that they work to the incentive, is that it's the wrong incentive. So what would you recommend as a better incentive, something that's tied to the client's end goal? Like if the client says, I need computers to achieve another $1 million in growth this year, which they probably do, and I need those computers to operate with duty of care. So my client's information, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I need your services. Help me achieve that. How does the salesperson get incentivized to meet that objective?
Right. So I think there's a lot there, right? So let's try and unpack that a little bit. So I think we need to have specific incentives for sales, for outside sales. So salespeople hunting business, going and finding business for new prospects for vCISO contracts and IT services. Yeah, that's our traditional, incentive structure, and they should get paid for what they sell because that's what they're doing. Now, on the other side of that, with existing clients, when we get to that stewardship phase, as I mentioned, I don't think there should be incentives for the people on the front lines making the recommendations. That's your vCIOs and your vCISOs, right? Those should be higher level advisors who are acting as a fractional executive for the client, right? Balancing the client's best interests with budget and everything else. So I'm accessing the little workflow we have in the Power Grid for this right now. But when they make those recommendations, then now it depends on the size of your MSP at this point. That should go to an AM or customer success or whoever you're calling it. And those are your order takers. They're the people who are processing renewals, efficient license upgrades, things like that. So it should go to them to create that stuff. And then they're getting paid a lower percent. They're getting paid like, and you know how this works, right? Like a customer success is getting paid low percentage because they're doing high transactions of just recurring. They're not really selling. They're just fulfillment, right? Now, if you don't have that, you're not big enough to have those roles spread out, you accordion some of that down, right? And then the salesperson has to go do those renewals and process the contract and get that in front of the client and everything else, right? But again, I think they should be paid on that lower percentage because really it should be served up to them. If we have the right process in place and we're using, let's say, the Power Grid vCISO system, we're able to then say, okay, we have templates for all this stuff. Or the vCISO made the recommendation. They're the ones working on a strategic level with the customer. Here's what you recommend. Here's the quote template, plug in the numbers. It's very minimal work for the salesperson. And by the way, they are getting a slight percentage based on that. And then incentives for the vCISOs, that's on department profitability, because we want them to be focused on optimizing for service delivery and incentivizing that, because that's what's bringing value to the client.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's always critical to think, what's the value that you're providing to the client? Like that's the metric that we always want to look at. How we define value is murky and contextual, no doubt. But that's the most important thing to keep thinking about, because that's the problem that the client cares about. The client wants something. The client doesn't want tickets fulfilled.
Yeah.
Client doesn't want to buy more licenses. The client wants some other objective met. Yeah. Like I want to reduce this expense. I want to double this. And to double this, I need to be able to do stuff on the computers. Make that happen.
We want to we want to expand to a new market segment. Let's say it's a manufacturer and they want to expand into government contracts because it's lucrative. Well, okay, they have CMMC. So a vCISO has to come in and help them build a CMMC security program and enable their business to do that fast. I mean, we have some members who are doing that right now, and actually flipping that that messaging on its head, where instead of CMMC being this regulatory burden that now you have to comply with, let's use it to hunt new business and to really lean into this and expand into that. Or let's make a critical decision. By the way, we've had some MSPs who have talked with their clients and said, you say you need CMMC. Why is that? Well, how much revenue is actually on the line for your contract? You're a manufacturing company. Okay, you're doing 50 million a year. Oh, and $1 million of it is with this one contract for CMMC. So now you need CMMC and you're going to spend a couple $100,000 to do that. Really doesn't make sense. Maybe we should put our efforts into hunting down new business in different segments. Or if we see an opportunity there and we have some risk appetite to go after that and expand into a new market segment, yes, then let's strategically build that CMMC program for a specific type of subsegment or micro segment in that particular vertical, and then start expanding and attacking that. Now we are just acting as a strategic advisor to the client right there. We're not saying buy my widget or you're going to get hacked. Right.
Oh, you want CMMC? Here's a shopping list of all of the licenses that you need to buy right now.
Right.
Which I know many people think about it like that, is the compliance will drive more licenses, but that it's a gross relation. The client feels that that's a gross relationship when the first thing that you say is, no problem, I have a shopping list that you need to buy. Because that's not what they wanted. But in your case, if the vCISO said, yes, no problem, that 2% of your current revenue, if we follow these steps, I've seen it with other clients, and you put behind it some business development, we can make that 10%. That's a good return. And if the client says, yeah, okay, that's what I want. How do you make that happen? And you say, no problem. I got this roadmap. I'll fill in all the details for you. You start doing your business development work, because in 18 months, you'll be ready for this.
Exactly. And that's it.
So let's keep going on the CMMC.
Are we done? No, I'm just kidding. That's it. We solved the problem. We solved it all.
CMMC is popular. So it's a very popular talk track. Same with other compliances, but the CMMC is a fun one because it's sort of a carrot as opposed to a stick, which gets more people excited about it because they like carrots.
Right.
How do you help your vCISO clients present that in a marketable way to their clients? So it's not like, hey, do you want to go through this boring paperwork? I will do it for you. That's not an attractive pitch. As opposed to your example, like, hey, you're right now only making 2% of your revenue from a defense contractor. If you fill in this and add some BD, you can make that 5 times bigger. Do you want to do that?
Yeah. I think some ways to talk about it from that perspective is just, number one, let's look at it as a positive instead of another regulatory burden. I think there's economies of scale that can be had with CMMC because we're kind of unifying all. Like if you get CMMC, now you can start going after everything, right? So we've unified the standard. And so it's like, hey, if we do this and we put this program in place, all of a sudden we've created a business process now to start going after more contracts. And so I think there's a way to talk about it in a way that, hey, we're enabling more business through doing this, and we're helping you to expand your total addressable market by doing this. Now, there is cost associated with it, but especially if you're already deep into it, like, hey, this is actually good news. So I think that's the thing, is flipping away from the FUD and saying, you got to buy this stuff or you're going to lose all your contracts. It's the same like you're going to get hacked thing, right? How about this is actually good news. We have a roadmap for how to get here. And when you do this, you're eliminating a ton of guesswork for your organization, because now you have a rock solid roadmap and program that you can go start chasing down contracts in all sorts of different markets that maybe you had been reticent to do before because ITAR had some export rules over here, and there's some other things to think about, right?
Mm-hmm. Anytime you can use it as a marketable advantage is great, because then
Yeah.
all the efforts aren't a cost center; they're an investment to make a return. And if you pair that with an appropriate business development strategy, it can be a sizable return, because the
Right.
moat is so large, and your
Yeah.
competitors may not be doing that. And this is so. Do you coach your vCISO clients to then coach their clients on more of this business strategy than just technology strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what you should do as a strategic advisor. I mean, that's the kind of the core of what we're doing in the Power Grid, is saying, let's figure out, like, this is could be a whole nother conversation, but let's niche down, take the Peter Thiel competition is for losers, dominate a really small market segment, and then replicate out, which I know you're smiling because I know you've seen that talk before.
0 to 1.
Yeah. But taking that approach and then using that to create hyper specific outcomes with our vCISO packages for the clients in that micro segment, so that when they're coming in, you're having business conversations like, I know you need to do X, Y, and Z, and my package does A, B, and C, which links up with those perfectly, right? So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, doing, linking business outcomes to security. Because again, everybody says that, oh, you got to make security business outcomes. I feel like half the people saying it don't even know what they're saying when they
Right.
say that,
It
right?
requires you to understand what business outcomes usually are.
Yeah.
This is like, that's the difference between you pushing stuff at the client and you saying, "Hey, client, I have dealt with many clients like you. I really know the types of stuff that you're going through. Like, I know
Mhm.
your life. Hey, were you thinking about achieving this objective? Yes. How'd you know?
Right.
It's because I work with a lot of people very similar like you. Let me
Right.
tell you one of the stories about how this other person achieved it. Let's make your recipe." That's the value of getting into the niche,
Yeah.
because you then can, instead of knowing everyone's business problems, which is too large, you can know your specific
Mhm.
type of business problems.
A niche that's working for us is for some of our clients is CMMC one. We actually have a lot of European and UK MSPs who ISO 27001, also Canada ISO 27001. We're seeing a lot of MSPs and vCISOs finding success building ISMS programs, and then the messaging there is like, your hair is always on fire for your audit every year, right? Let's smooth that out and not grind your business to a halt for 2 months when your audit comes around next year. And by the way, you'll be more secure and you can use it to go start working with bigger clients and better clients, right? That's a great package to talk about to a client. They hear that and they're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean by that. And then when you couple that with specific language to their industry, and that's what I was saying before. I think last time we spoke, you said you were talking to someone and they're like, hey, yeah, just listen to the podcasts in your industry and you're going to hear how your clients talk and what they're actually talking about in their industry, right? So that's an easy way to do those things.
Yeah. That's one of my you can't call it a hack, because it's good effort and it gets good reward, but that's one of my tactics for learning more about a vertical, is just finding
Right.
some podcasts about the vertical and listening to those, because then you hear all the lingo and you hear what people are talking about. And I'm not talking about, like, if we're doing manufacturing, I'm talking about like IT for manufacturers. I'm just talking about a manufacturing podcast. There's tons of them. Or
Yeah.
YouTube channels if you want
Yeah.
to do the visuals. YouTube's also great. Like, you can get day in the life videos of almost any job. So go watch those day in the life videos or listen to the podcast, and then you
Right.
start learning what the client sees every day.
Yeah. And by the way, you can ask your clients that, is say, hey, I want to learn more about your industry. What do you like to listen to? Where do you get your information from? Right. And then if you're listening to those things and you shoot them an email or talk to them, be like, hey, I was listening to that podcast you recommended and they mentioned X, Y, and Z. What do you think about that? How are you guys starting to navigate that? Right. All of a sudden, you just created this really tight link with your client. You're helping them talk, or you're helping them navigate their business in the methods that they're used to doing it. And all of a sudden you're like on the side of the table with them, right?
Yeah, that builds a lot of trust and familiarity because they see that you care enough to learn about them. You don't have to
Right.
tell them like you're doing your homework and you're studying their life on podcasts and YouTube.
Yeah.
You just let it ooze out of the conversations and they'll hear it and they'll know this person
Hmm.
knows about me. Okay. I had this
Right.
problem. That's how you build enough trust for them to be vulnerable to tell you their real problems.
And by the way, then you can use all that stuff to enhance your messaging
Yeah.
for your go to market with new prospecting and everything else in that niche, like we just talked about,
Mhm.
right?
Okay, so back to our CMMC conversation. What clients
Yeah.
is that a great package for? Like, who's that really working for in the end client world?
Um, well, I think smaller manufacturers are actually struggling there because they don't have the resources or the time or the clue. Now you have to be careful because you get too small and it's just like that it might not make good business sense for them, right? So maybe they're ones that you just need to be like, hey, I don't think you should do CMMC. But I think anywhere from like I don't know, 10 to 50 employees, 10 to 100 employees, you could look at enclave strategies for them that they may not know about. And then when you get upwards of like 250, 300, now you're looking at GCC high Azure deployments and bringing them along that journey and helping them migrate all that stuff. That's good dollars, by the way, for your MSP, right? But it's also something that creates super stickiness with the client because you've built this custom environment for them and helped them migrate over for it. And now you have all the support that you have to do for it going
Okay, you
forward.
jump to the tech. Tell me the middle
What?
step though. 'Cause small manufacturers, 10 to 100 employees, they got to be selling to a federal um, purchaser, right? That's the envelope for CMMC.
Well, yeah, they have to be handling CUI, right? Classified, or what is it? I don't even know the acronym. There's no CUI is the classified information
Mhm.
that they have to mention, they have to protect, right? So is it confidential, unclassified information? Anyways, um, the so that's what they have to protect. So government contracts or federal DoD contracts require that stuff, right? So point being is that those small manufacturers do not have the processes in place because a lot of this is business process. They don't have the processes in place to say, hey, we're protecting this information. So, like, how does information enter the system? You have to sit down with them and say, okay, when you get an order, where does it go? Do you store it in SharePoint? Do you store it here? Okay, you can't do that anymore. You got to store it in the enclave and then you got to print it out and you got to walk it over to the factory floor. And then when you're done, you got to store it or shred it or whatever you're doing there to make sure that every piece that it touches is protected by the standards of this new CMMC regulation.
Hmm. Okay. Are there have you come across business advisors, not vCISO, but just like business advisors that are helping small manufacturers bid on government contracts? What I'm going after here is like,
Mm,
is there a sister industry that MSPs don't know about because we are looking at ourselves? Is there a sister industry of like business coaches for the manufacturers just on the business side, and the vCISO can pair with
yeah.
them as like a affiliate collab so that the vCISO is doing this, the risk systems, and the business coach is saying like, and this is how you bid, and this is how you network through the DoD and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't have any specific names, but I know in the power grid, that's exactly what we're advising RMSPs to do. And I think that plays in any industry, by the way, not just CMMC, is you need to find parallel providers in your industry that are providing other services and do cross pollination with your go to markets there. That's like the easiest way to get uptake in an industry. So absolutely, there are organizations that do that. And there's specific software or CRMs or things like that that our members are using to say, hey, let's talk about securing CMMC within your particular product. I'll be there as the CMMC expert to answer questions on like, well, how do I do this or do that? And it's a great go to market because the software vendor is able to say, okay, here's an expert that I'm bringing in to help you guys, and it helps me push my product. And then you're getting positioned as the expert that answers all those questions. So obviously there's more questions. Obviously they're going to want to talk to you after the event, right? So whatever that case may be, whether it's business coaches that are helping get government contracts, because there are organizations that do that, or software vendors in the space. You want to create those partnerships, and you want to do some go-to-market stuff with them, because you get heightened visibility. Again, you're force multiplying your visibility both ways.
That,
right?
and like what you and I are talking about now, is a lot for someone to chew on. Like, just doing the risk management upskilling for themselves is a big lift. Then if you also are putting on their plate, you got to know their business strategies. You got to have some input on their business development plans. And we're talking about going from $1 million to $10 million in the client's revenue. That's a big conversation to have, perhaps outside of the upskilling curve for the MSP employees. So maybe that's where the partnership comes, is we find business coaches, or, it's not digital transformation, but something along those lines. CMMC, like the non-technical parts of CMMC.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying, I guess and that's what I want to be. I want people to hear me, is I'm not saying that you have to be like this business expert for their vertical, right? That's what they have to do. But what you can do is say, hey, we know that you're going after these things, and here's the ways that we can enable that through the security program. And oh, by the way, have you considered our partner over here who helps you get more contracts? They can talk to you more about that. And by the way, as you sit through those conversations, you'll become more educated on those types of things.
Right. The value in the partnership to me is the client's trying to achieve the end goal. If you find another way to help them get to the end goal faster or better, your inherent value increases, because then you can say, yes, you could do this yourself, or you could do it yourself and me, or if we include this third person who has a proven track record of doubling the rate of return, then we all win. And then the MSP or vCISO then has a higher perceived value, because instead of going from 1 million to 2 million in revenue, it's 1 million to 5 million, and they charge based on that perceived value. All right, so we've been breaking down vCISO services, what the letters mean, what it means to an MSP, and one of the positioning sort of go-to-market strategies centered around CMMC, because that is a big one and a popular one, which is a good draw for the clients. A lot of small businesses are trying to get in on CMMC, and it has intrinsic value to them as a carrot, not as a stick, which is attractive to everyone.
Well, and I will say the last word on this is that there's a lot, because of all the buzz, there's a lot of tire kicking going on. So you can grind your sales cycles down and have them be more efficient. You got to be careful of that, right? So I think being able to quickly identify and actually make recommendations like, yeah, I don't think CMMC is right for you, or we need to refer you to a partner, right? There are partners out there who do the full gamut for the 2 to 5 or the 2 to 10 enclave strategy. Like, go talk to them, they'll hook you up, right? And we have that as our partner, right? That we can bring in and maybe make a referral fee on that. So I think understanding that, how to really identify those right fit opportunities and make sure that they're willing to spend the money, that the revenue's there, or advising them, maybe this isn't the right path for you. And we think, you probably want to double think this, because you're talking about a couple $100,000. Is it really worth that to your business?
Break down some numbers on that, because that is a very healthy thing for the vCISO to think about. The example is, and you've probably heard this many times, when you ask someone, well, who's a good client for you? And they say, anyone breathing.
Yeah.
And that's never true.
Yeah.
So you just told us who's not a good client, which is great for people to know. So continue on this example. Give one who's not a good client to have the CMMC discussion, so the vCISO can put that in their tool belt.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if we're talking CMMC specifically, I would say probably anyone that has under 10% of their revenue. Now, again, we're talking $1 billion in revenue, 10% might be worth it. But let's say under $100 million, and they have like 5 or less % of their revenue in CMMC contracts, right? So there has to be a strategic, and then there has to be the question: is there an appetite with leadership to make a concerted effort to go after more CMMC business, or should we shut the door on CMMC and actually pursue more business in different market segments? So you need to identify that. So the bad fit clients are the ones who are not willing to spend the money. So it's easy conversation. Like, I would just say you're looking at between $100,000 to $200,000 minimum to get this program off the ground. And then there's the recurring maintenance that's going to be probably 6 figures every year for it. Is that does your contract value justify that type of expense? And that's an easy question to ask. And if they say, oh, geez, I don't know. Well, okay, well, let's talk about it. Or absolutely, yes, we need to get this done. 50% of our work is with the DoD. Okay, now let's talk, right?
Okay, that's a great starting point. Not only does it show to the client that the vCISO knows what they're talking about and gives some pushback. I always like the pushback because it helps build trust that you're not just going to say yes and you need this. Yes, of course I will do it for you, because that's not a relationship. That's a transaction. So if you say, hold on, maybe this isn't right for you, that builds trust, because then the prospect or client thinks that you're not just selling them anything that they ask for.
Yeah.
So in your numbers, it's going to cost 100 to 200K just to prepare and get ready, and then another 100K every year to maintain.
Yeah, at least. That's
Okay.
like, I'd say if you hear that and that's shocking, then we probably shouldn't be talking. And then the other thing is, going back to that niche, like we're like, well, yeah, our ICP is manufacturers who are required or subject to CMMC. That's not an ICP. Like, how about we work with manufacturers who help build nuclear submarines. Now that's a better ICP, right?
Right. The manufacturing is a vertical, and there's tons of niches in between. Like you make widgets or springs or magnets or bullets or vests or anything.
Yeah. So you make parts for nuclear submarines. There's probably, I don't know, 50 to 100 companies out there that are doing that, if not more, I would guess, right? So that's a pretty good market to start and go after, especially if you get one or two under your belt. And then you can go to them and say, hey, I talked to Bob, and they're, you can't say what they're doing, but I talked to Bob over here. We're helping them. And they have some struggles with X, Y, and Z in terms of their CUI. Like, here's how we help. They're like, oh, yeah. You actually help people working on the same project as us in the same industry in the same super specific vertical as us solve these problems. It's a much more powerful narrative. And then, by the way, your scopes of work should be talking about that, and your onboarding should be talking about that, and your customer management should be talking about that. It's all marketing as you go through the customer continuum.
Mm-hmm. The riches are in the niches.
That's right.
Just say I do CMMC for manufacturers. Yes. Thousands of MSPs say that. Okay, and probably many in your area, and probably many to the same prospect. But if you said, I only work with nuclear submarines that do propulsion systems and not weapons delivery, okay, I'm talking. I'm hearing you. Tell me more. And in that very tiny group, especially for the ticket price that we're talking, like several $100,000, you talk to another decision maker. This is a word of mouth type of approach, because when one decision maker has just spent 300 grand, and the friend that they know, like the professional colleague that they have, that person's going to say, listen, I don't want to screw around and spend 300 grand on someone I don't know. Just tell me your person. Give me your person. Like that's a strong word of mouth, which you unlock when you have such a hyper niche focus, because then you become the propulsion system on nuclear sub CMMC consultant. Okay, now we're talking about some name recognition.
Yep. Yeah. And by the way, you saturate that market, or not even saturate, you get 5-10 clients in there. Okay. Now we have money to go invest in our next, pod that's going to go after the weapon systems. Because by the way, we do all the propulsion. Now let's get the weapon systems companies, right? So you just stack on that.
Right. Then we throw back to Peter Thiel's 0 of 1. You want to be the big fish in a small pond, because a big fish in a small pond is a much stronger position than a tiny fish in a big pond. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people say is like, well, I'll do IT services for anyone with computer. Okay, you're the most smallest microorganism in this giant ocean, and everyone says that. So what's going to make you different when a prospect asks you that question? But if you say, I only do CMMC compliance packages for nuclear submarine propulsion manufacturers. Oh, sweet, because that's me. Why wouldn't I want that? You charge twice as much as the person that does anyone with a computer? Yeah, because I specialize just for, I know your entire life cycle. I know your chain of pain. Okay. That's what they're going to say. Yeah. And you did Jerry? I did Jerry too. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, here's a video testimonial from Jerry. I'll send it over to you.
And there's only 8 Jerrys, so it's either Jerry or Jenny or Jimmy. Oh, you did Jerry? And Jerry's happy? I saw Jerry doubled this year. I want the Jerry package. You sell a Jerry package? Yeah, it's twice as much.
Right.
Give it to me. I'm still going to make 10 times my money back. Because that is the power of the niches. We'll do a riches in the niches episode later, but that's the power, because then the prospect knows exactly what they're going to get, and you tied it to the end outcome. Like Jesse said at the beginning, you're tying it from going from $1 million in revenue to $10 million in revenue from this business vertical. You're making them $9 million. You're not selling them $200,000. You're making them $9 million. So even if you wanted to give them a 10x return, that's $900,000. It's much better. You're tying your perceived value to a much larger goal than, here's my expenses, I'm going to take a 20% margin on that.
And then take your email subject lines every time you email them about that and say, making $9 million.
That's what you should do, Jess. I mean, right? It's not a joke. That's how you should position it, because that's how they're thinking about it. They're thinking, I need to make more money. And you're saying, great, my Jerry package, which I got to tell you is only for propulsion systems for nuclear submarine manufacturers. So that's not you. This is not going to work. But my Jerry package is it took us 12 months to prepare. And then the subsequent 18 months, Jerry made $9 million. Do you want that package? Yeah. Okay. What's it going to take? Don't worry what it's going to take. Like, we got the package. We're going to do all the legwork. It's going to cost you this payment plan. But by the end of, what is that, 40 months? What did I say? It's going to be $9 million. Are you okay with that? Yes. 30 months. That's better. 30 months is better. $9 million in 30 months. Yeah. This seems a little bit trivial, but we're tying our value to their perceived outcome, which is the biggest perceived outcome we can tie it to.
Yeah. Obviously for entertainment purposes, we're taking a few shortcuts here, but that really is like, that's the link, right? And you have to position that way to be a trusted advisor and a strategic advisor for your client. And that's how these services work.
Yeah. And that, tying it back to the beginning, that is the intrinsic connection here, is you're positioning yourself as an advisor, which is a partner helping them achieve their goals, not as an outsourced employee, which does work for them.
Right.
An outsourced employee is looked at as the minimum cost center possible. An advisor is an integral partner achieving their goal. And if you're an integral partner achieving their goal, you tie your value to the goal's value, not to your expenses.
Yeah. So actually, if you're watching, there's the powergrid.group link right there. So that's POWERGRYD.group, GREOUP, for those listening. And you just click the sign up link. That'll send an email. Somebody will reach out to you and they'll get you some information on it, walk you through the platform, walk you through the process, show you how it all works. And it's very easy sign up. Once you get going, you'll be in the community and you'll start building your vCISO program.
And if they're just thinking about dipping their toe in, where can they connect with you? Where can they find out more? Like, where's the free material to see if this is right for them?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. Thanks for the prompt there. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm posting daily on there about tips and actionable ways to get better at doing this. Free go-to-market workbook that if you ping me with a DM, I'll send you. I actually had an MSP tell me the other day that is signing up for the Power Grid, that they're like, yeah, I used your go-to-market workbook and I actually built my new go-to-market plan. Now I want to build the whole thing. Let's talk, right? So get started with that. Ping me on LinkedIn. My username is SecOps Warrior, SecOpsWarrior.
Right on. Thanks for joining the show, everyone. That's been Cyber Confidential with Jesse Miller from Power Grid.
Bye, guys.
Enjoyed this episode? Hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe.